Jessa Whitmore's heel snapped with a sharp crack just as she stepped off the curb in front of the towering glass building, sending her stumbling forward and into a puddle of embarrassment outside Vane Industries. "Seriously?" she muttered, one foot wobbling awkwardly while the other remained hopelessly bent at an angle. She looked down at the traitorous shoe, the heel dangling by a thread of plastic. Her face flushed as people in sleek suits flowed around her, barely giving her a glance. Of course this would happen on her first day temping for the finance department. She'd borrowed the heels from her cousin, thinking they looked professional. Now she looked like a disaster. "You okay?" a deep voice asked above her. She looked up and froze. A man in a black suit stood there, holding a steaming coffee in one hand and a phone in the other, his tie perfectly knotted, his hair like it had been styled by an expensive wind. His jawline could cut glass. His eyes, gray with a hint of steel, locked on her with a mix of concern and curiosity. "I am fine," she stammered, brushing back her hair and trying to balance. "Well, except my shoe just gave up on life." He glanced down at her foot, then without hesitation, crouched and gently removed the broken heel from her foot like it was nothing. "What are you?" she started. "You can't walk like that," he said. "Here." Before she could protest, he shrugged off his suit jacket and placed it on the ground in front of her like a red carpet. "Step on this." "What?" "No, I can't." "You'll cut your foot on the sidewalk. Just step on it." Still stunned, she obeyed, stepping onto the tailored jacket with her good foot, the broken one hovering awkwardly. "Give me your arm," he said. She hesitated, but slid her hand into his. His grip was warm, strong, steady. He helped her walk toward the building doors slowly, shielding her from the early morning crowd. "I'm really not usually this dramatic," she said breathlessly. "I swear." He gave a quiet laugh. "I think you're doing just fine." The security guard opened the door for them with a puzzled look. "Mr. Vale, good morning." "Mr. Vale?" Jessa blinked, then turned to the man helping her. "Wait, you're Trenton Vale," he said with a small nod. "I run the place." Her mouth went dry. "You're the CEO?" "Guilty." She nearly tripped again. "Oh my God. I'm temping for the finance department." "I didn't know." "It's fine," he said, leading her to one of the elevators. "What's your name?" "Jessa. Jessa Whitmore." "Well, Jessa Whitmore, let's get you a pair of shoes." "I'm sorry." Before she could blink, he pressed a button and the elevator soared up. They stepped out onto a sleek office floor with glass walls and views of the entire city. A woman in a sharp pantsuit looked up. "Isabel," Trenton said, "can you get Miss Whitmore a pair of black flats in her size?" "Something comfortable." Jessa stared. "No, I can't let you buy me shoes." "You didn't ask me," he said plainly. "I offered." She opened her mouth, then closed it. This was unreal. 15 minutes later, she was sitting in a leather chair in his office, sipping the coffee he insisted she take from him while a box of brand new designer flats sat on the floor beside her. He sat across from her, watching her with an amused expression. "So," he said, "first day, huh?" She gave him a look. "You must think I'm a total mess." "I think," he said slowly, "you're the most interesting thing that's happened to me all week." Her stomach flipped. "Thank you," she said after a beat. "Really, you didn't have to do any of this." "I wanted to." She looked away, unsure what to say. This man was way out of her league, and yet there was something about the way he looked at her like she wasn't just some temp in a broken shoe. He stood and walked to the door. "Come by my office again sometime. I'd like to know how your first day goes." "Okay." As she made her way to the finance floor in her new shoes, heart still pounding, she could feel the weight of his gaze lingering. Over the next few days, she caught glimpses of him sometimes in the lobby, sometimes in the cafeteria. Every time, he gave her a nod. Once he even stopped just to ask, "How's the job?" Her coworkers noticed. "You know the CEO?" One whispered. Not really, she lied. I just broke my shoe. But the way he looked at her didn't feel casual. And a week later, when she was walking out of the building late, juggling her tote bag and a box of files, she heard his voice again. Need help? She turned. Mr. Vale, Trenton, he corrected. She laughed nervously. Trenton, let me give you a ride. I'm fine. Really, it's raining, he said, pointing to the sky. Come on. It was raining. She hadn't even noticed. His car was sleek, black, and had a driver. He held the door open for her and slid in beside her like this was perfectly normal. I don't usually accept rides from strangers, she said. He smiled at her. Am I still a stranger? She looked at him for a long moment. Not really. They talked the whole ride. About books. About the city. About how she had to work temp jobs to support her mom, who was recovering from surgery. He listened. Really listened. When they pulled up to her apartment, he walked her to the door, umbrella in hand. Thank you, she said quietly. For everything. He hesitated, then leaned in just slightly, close enough for her to feel his breath. Dinner, he said. Let me take you to dinner. She blinked. Like a real dinner. Like a real one. I want to get to know you, not just rescue you from sidewalks. Jessa's heart thudded. She nodded. Yes. Okay. He gave her a look she couldn't quite read, something between curiosity and something deeper, and then turned and walked back to the car. As she stepped inside her apartment, soaked in rain and butterflies, she realized something terrifying. She wanted to see him again. Badly. And maybe, just maybe, this wasn't just about a broken shoe anymore. The restaurant didn't have a sign outside. Just tall carved bronze doors and a valet who opened Jessa's car door before she realized they'd arrived. She stepped onto the stone pathway, heels tapping softly as Trenton appeared beside her in a tailored charcoal suit that made him look like he belonged in a high-stakes courtroom or a royal portrait. Is this place even open to the public? She asked, glancing up at the flickering sconces and ivy-covered archway. In theory, he said, offering his arm. But tonight, it's just us. She blinked. You reserved the whole place? He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The maitre d' greeted them by name, her name too, somehow, and led them to a table near a wall of windows overlooking the river. The skyline shimmered across the water like a dream. A string quartet played softly in the corner. The lighting was low, warm. Jessa felt like she'd walked into a movie set and someone had forgotten to tell her she wasn't the lead actress. She ran her fingers over the linen tablecloth to ground herself. You look like you're trying not to bolt, Trenton said as he sat across from her. I'm trying not to faint, she said honestly. I've never even seen silverware this polished. He leaned forward, resting one hand on the table. I didn't bring you here to intimidate you. I just wanted a night where we wouldn't be interrupted by board meetings or broken elevators. Jessa laughed quietly. You're definitely succeeding. They ordered. He didn't glance at the menu and the wine arrived in a bottle older than she was. She took a cautious sip. I was expecting you to cancel, he said after a beat. Why? People usually assume they'll be safer if they keep their distance from me. She tilted her head. Why would I assume that? Because I'm not exactly subtle and I don't lead a quiet life. You think I'm scared of you? He studied her face. I think you're braver than most. The way he said it made her chest tighten. She didn't know what to say to that, so she asked, have you always known you'd end up running a company like this? He leaned back slightly, eyes flicking to the window. No. My father had other plans. Law school, politics. He thought the business world was too transactional. But you didn't listen? I did. For a while. His voice lowered. I went to law school. Graduated top of my class. Took a job at a firm in D.C. I was miserable. What changed? He hesitated. A friend died. Someone I worked with. Car accident. It made me realize I was building a life I didn't even want. Jessa didn't expect that. She watched him closely. So you left? Gave my notice, moved back, and took over the company when my uncle stepped down. Everyone thought I was crazy. And now they think I'm dangerous. But successful. She sat with that a moment. You don't seem dangerous to me. He gave her a look that was unreadable. That might change. The food arrived plates like artwork, and she tried not to let the taste of truffle cream sauce distract her from how he was watching her. "What about you?" he asked. "What did you want to be before all this?" She hesitated. "A journalist. I used to write stories in the margins of my homework. I thought I'd travel the world and write about things that mattered." "What happened?" "My mom got sick. I took a job after college to help cover her treatments. One job turned into another. I kept telling myself it was temporary. But it's not." She shook her head. "Not yet, anyway." He was quiet. Then, "What would you write about if you could drop everything right now?" "People," she said without thinking. "The ones no one notices. The woman who cleans 20 hotel rooms a day. The man who empties garbage bins at 4 in the morning. I think there's more truth in their lives than in any press release." Trenton didn't respond immediately. When he did, his voice was softer. "You see things most people miss." "I've had to," she said gently. There was a silence between them that wasn't awkward, just heavy with something unspoken. He poured her more wine, his fingers brushing the rim of her glass. "Don't take this the wrong way," he said, "but you don't fit into any box I've seen." She raised her brow. "Is that a compliment?" "It's a warning," he said. "People around me expect certain things. They play games. You don't." "No," she said, finishing her wine. "I don't. And that makes you dangerous too." She laughed, but it caught in her throat as his gaze pinned her. The air between them shifted. Outside, thunder rolled faintly. Rain streaked the windows, casting shadows across his face. He stood and offered his hand. "Come with me." She followed him through a side hallway and up a narrow staircase to a rooftop garden no one else seemed to know existed. Strings of lights hung from trellises and low tables sat beneath canopies of wisteria. Rain drizzled around them, but the awning kept them dry. He pulled a blanket from a nearby bench and wrapped it around her shoulders. "I thought you didn't do quiet," she said. "I don't," he replied. "Except with you." Jessa turned to him, her heart thudding in her chest. "Why me?" He didn't hesitate. "Because you don't want anything from me." She swallowed. "What if I do?" His jaw tensed. "What is it you want?" "I don't know yet," she whispered. "But I think I want to find out." He stepped closer. "Then stay." Everything in her told her to run. This wasn't her world. But the way he looked at her like she was something rare, something real, made her want to stay rooted. She reached up and rested her hand against his chest. His heart beat steady beneath her palm. "I will." He exhaled and something unguarded passed across his face. Neither of them moved as the storm rumbled above, the city lights flickering gold beneath them. And for the first time in years, Jessa didn't feel like she was surviving. She felt like she was beginning. Jessa's fingers hovered over her keyboard, eyes locked on the quarterly report blinking back at her. Numbers swam unfocused. She wasn't thinking about spreadsheets or invoices or the fact that she was already 10 minutes behind on reconciling vendor payments. She was thinking about Trenton. It had been 5 days since that night on the rooftop. Since the rain fell around them while he held her gaze like it meant something. Since he told her to stay. And she had. But now everything felt different. He hadn't called. Hadn't stopped by her floor. No texts. No elevator run-ins. It was like he'd vanished, except she knew he hadn't. She'd seen his name in 3 meeting emails this morning alone. She shut her laptop and stood. "You okay?" her coworker Mark asked without looking up. "Just need a break." She kept her pace casual as she walked to the elevator. But inside, her nerves were unraveling. Maybe she'd misread everything. Maybe that rooftop moment had meant nothing to him. Maybe this was what it was like to get too close to someone who didn't live in the same world she did. She stepped into the elevator, pressed the button for the top floor, and crossed her arms. When the doors slid open, the receptionist gave her a surprised look. "Is Mr. Vale expecting you?" "No," Jessa said, stepping in anyway. "But I'm not here for long." The office door was cracked open. She knocked once and pushed it wide. Trenton looked up from his desk, brows lifting. "Jessa, I didn't mean to interrupt," she said. standing stiffly just inside the doorway. "I just wanted to ask you something." He set his pen down. "Come in." She walked in but stayed standing. "Did I do something wrong?" His expression shifted. "No. Why would you think that? You haven't talked to me. I thought maybe I misread what happened the other night." Trenton stood slowly, walking around the desk. He didn't touch her, just stood close enough that she could see the hint of exhaustion under his eyes. "I've been dealing with a situation I couldn't avoid," he said. "But no. You didn't misread anything." She exhaled, unsure if it was relief or something sharper. "I felt like you disappeared. I didn't want to drag you into it." "What is it?" He hesitated, then nodded toward the couch in the corner. "Sit with me." They sat, the distance between them taut like a wire. "My company's general counsel leaked information to a competitor," he said. "We're handling it quietly, but it's been disruptive." "Why didn't you just tell me?" "Because I didn't want our first week of whatever this is to be tainted by corporate espionage." She looked at him. "You think I care about that? I think you deserve better than someone whose life is a constant fire." She didn't flinch. "Maybe I'm not afraid of fire." He studied her, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. Then he reached into a drawer and pulled out a small box. "I was planning to give you this after dinner that night, but things moved faster than I expected." She opened it slowly. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet, thin as a whisper with a single charm, a miniature shoe. She stared at it. "I had it made," he said. "The exact shape of the heel you broke outside this building." Jessa looked up, stunned. "Why would you do that?" "Because I remember things that matter," he said. "And you mattered the second you cursed at the sidewalk." Emotion crawled up her throat. She reached out and let him clasp the bracelet around her wrist. It was cool against her skin, but her heart was burning. "I'm not going to pretend this is simple," he said. "I work too much. I take risks that scare people. I don't sleep when I should, and I can be impossible when I'm focused. But I want to try. If you do." She looked down at her wrist, then back up at him. "I do." He leaned in, not for a kiss, but just to rest his forehead against hers. The silence between them was deep, steady. Then his phone buzzed. He reached for it instinctively, but she grabbed his hand. "No," she said firmly. "Not right now." He stared at her for a beat, then nodded. "You're right." She stood. "Come with me." "Where?" "A real break. Just for an hour." He laughed softly. "You're taking me hostage?" "No. I'm rescuing you." 15 minutes later, they were standing in a quiet corner of the city's botanical conservatory. Jessa had her shoes off, her toes sinking into the soft grass of the indoor garden. Trenton stood beside her, jacket off, tie loosened. He looked nothing like the man who'd stared down investors and board members all week. "Why here?" he asked. "Because it's quiet. And it smells like life." He looked around, then back at her. "You're full of surprises." "So are you." They sat on a bench, surrounded by orchids and low-hanging vines. Sunlight filtered through the glass ceiling, warm and gold. "For the record," he said, "I've never done this before." "Taken your shoes off in a public place?" "Let someone in." She didn't speak, just reached over and took his hand. After a long moment, he said, "When I saw you outside that day, I wasn't supposed to be downstairs. My driver took a wrong turn. I was annoyed. Then I saw you." She turned toward him. "That was the first time in months I forgot about the company, the markets, everything." "You looked like hell and you laughed anyway." "I was mortified. You were magnetic." She shook her head, smiling. "You really don't see people like I do." "No," he said quietly. "I see you exactly as you are." The words settled deep in her. She looked down at their joined hands. "So now what?" she asked. He gave a small smile. "Now I stop pretending I can keep my life in neat compartments. And you let me prove that I can make space for you in all of it." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "Good," she said. Because I wasn't planning on going anywhere. Jessa tugged at the zipper of her dress with trembling fingers, her reflection blinking back at her from the mirror in Trenton's penthouse. The skyline twinkled through the floor-to-ceiling windows behind her, but her eyes were on the soft navy silk clinging to her frame, simple, elegant, and unlike anything she'd worn before. Trenton had sent it over with a handwritten note. Not a message passed through his assistant or a courier, but a folded card with her name on it in his own handwriting. Tonight, no distractions, just us. She hadn't seen him in 3 days. He was overseas for meetings in Zurich, but he called when his plane landed that morning, his voice low and tired, but steady. "I've been thinking about you," he'd said. "More than I probably should." She hadn't answered right away. She didn't need to. He already knew. The elevator chimed. She slipped on her heels and crossed the polished marble floor. When the doors opened, Trenton stood there in a dark suit, freshly shaved, his hair damp like he'd just stepped out of the shower. He looked at her like the world had tilted slightly. "I'm underdressed," he said. She glanced down at her dress. "You picked this." "I didn't know it would look like that on you," he said. He took her hand and brought it to his chest, just over his heart. "I wanted tonight to be different," he said. "Not about work. Not about the mess waiting for me in the morning. Just a night where we stop pretending this isn't real." She stepped closer. "Then let's make it real." They left the building through the private garage where his car waited, sleek and black, like always. But instead of heading toward the city, they drove upstate, the lights fading behind them as hills and trees replaced buildings. "Where are we going?" she asked. "It's a surprise." The winding road led to a wrought iron gate, which opened slowly to reveal a quiet estate nestled into the hills. The house was old stone, covered in ivy, with lanterns glowing along the path. A breeze carried the scent of wood smoke and pine. Jessa stepped out of the car, stunned. "This place belonged to my grandfather," Trenton said, coming around to take her hand. "No one's lived here in years, but I've been restoring it." She followed him inside. The foyer was warm, filled with candlelight and the soft hum of classical music playing from an old gramophone. A fire crackled in the hearth. "You brought me here," she said, "to a house no one else has seen?" "I brought you here because this place is the only thing that ever felt like home to me," he said. "And I want you to be part of it." They ate in the library at a table set with porcelain dishes and crystal glasses. The meal was simple roasted vegetables, wine, a loaf of bread still warm from the oven, but it felt more intimate than any of their previous dinners. "I used to come here every summer," Trenton said, pouring her another glass of wine. "Before everything became about mergers and acquisitions. Back then, I thought I'd end up a professor, maybe disappear into a university somewhere." "You would have hated that," she said. He laughed. "Probably." Jessa reached for a book from the nearby shelf, running her fingers over its spine. "Do you ever think about walking away from it all?" "Until a few weeks ago, no," he said. "But now?" "Yeah. Sometimes." She looked at him, heart racing. "Because of me?" "Because with you, I don't feel like I have to prove anything. I'm not a title. I'm not a balance sheet. I'm just me." He stood and walked to the fireplace, pulling something from the mantel. When he turned back, he was holding a velvet box. She froze. He opened it slowly. Inside was a ring, delicate, antique, with a sapphire surrounded by diamonds. "This was my grandmother's," he said. "She wore it every day until the day she died. I kept it all these years because I didn't want it to go to someone who wouldn't understand what it meant." She stared at it, her breath caught in her throat. "I know this is fast," he continued. "I know we didn't plan any of this. But Jessa, I've built an empire, and none of it means anything when I wake up without you beside me. I love you. I've tried to be careful, tried to slow myself down, but I can't. I don't want to." Her knees nearly gave out. "You love me?" "I do. I loved you the second you cursed at the sky in a broken heel." She laughed through a tear, covering her mouth. "I don't care if you never write a single article, or if you change your mind tomorrow and decide to chase a story across the world. I'll follow you. I'll wait for you." I just need to know you're with me. She stepped forward, hands trembling, and touched the ring. I don't need slow, she whispered. I just need you. He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. The wind outside picked up, rustling the trees beyond the windows. But inside everything was still. He kissed her, not with the urgency of a man trying to possess her, but with the reverence of someone who'd finally stopped running. Later, they stood on the balcony overlooking the hills, arms around each other, the stars casting silver across the stone railing. Are you sure? He asked softly. I've never been more sure of anything, she said. You saw me when I was invisible to everyone else. You didn't just pull me out of that rain. You made me feel like I belonged. He leaned his forehead against hers. Then let's make a life where we both belong. In the months that followed, she moved into the penthouse. Not because he asked, but because she wanted to. She found a part-time job writing features for a small magazine, and on weekends they drove back to the old house in the hills, where she planted wildflowers and he fixed shutters with his sleeves rolled to his elbows. They didn't rush the wedding. But when it came, it was held under the wisteria in the rooftop garden where he'd first asked her to stay. The same quartet played. The same lights glowed. And when she walked toward him, dress catching the breeze, eyes never leaving his, she felt none of the fear that had once followed her like a shadow. Because she knew, without question, that she'd never be invisible again. Trenton Vale wasn't just the man who helped her on the sidewalk. He was the man who saw her worth before she ever saw it herself. And she broken heel, borrowed shoes, and all was the woman who changed everything. Jessa stood in the center of the ballroom, the train of her ivory dress fanned behind her like a soft ripple over polished marble. Candles flickered in tall glass columns, their flames mirrored in the crystal chandeliers above. Music drifted gently from a grand piano near the far wall, and the scent of gardenias hung in the air, fresh and heady. Trenton's hand tightened ever so slightly around hers as the officiant finished the final words of the ceremony. His eyes never left hers, not even when applause echoed around them and the string of gold bands slid into place on their fingers. Not even when she leaned forward and kissed him with every promise she had. Everything felt real now. Rooted. Permanent. They walked hand in hand through the archway of guests, laughter and cheers following them as they stepped into the moonlit garden behind the estate. The reception was already underway. Lights strung through the trees, tables dressed in white linen, centerpieces bursting with wildflowers. A jazz trio played beneath the pergola and waiters moved like shadows through the crowd, offering flutes of champagne and silver trays of hors d'oeuvres. Jessa turned to him as they reached the edge of the lawn. I still don't quite believe it. Trenton brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. You should. You're mine now. Officially. She arched a brow. Oh, I'm yours? Just like that. Yes, he said. Though I'd surrender everything I own if you asked. Even the company? She teased. He only looked at her for a moment. Especially the company. They were interrupted by a waiter who handed Trenton a folded note. He read it quickly, frowning slightly. What is it? She asked. He handed it to her. It was from the magazine she'd been freelancing for an offer to come on full-time. Editorial lead. A role she hadn't even applied for. I didn't ask for this, she said, confused. I know you didn't, he said, but someone must have noticed your work. She looked up. You didn't. I wouldn't interfere with your career. You earned that on your own. Relief and wonder swelled inside her. I want you to take it, he said. If it's what you want. She hesitated. It's a big step. So was marrying me, he said. You didn't flinch then. She narrowed her eyes. You're not going to start quoting wedding vows every time we disagree, are you? Only when I'm losing. He leaned in and kissed her again, firm, deliberate. The kind of kiss that cleared every doubt. She kissed him back, her fingers sliding into the lapels of his jacket. When they pulled away, the music shifted. A soft hush fell over the guests as the band began the first notes of the waltz Trenton had chosen weeks ago. He held out his hand. Dance with me, Mrs. Vale. She took it and he led her to the center of the lawn where the grass had been flattened into a perfect dance floor. He pulled her close, one hand at her waist, the other intertwining with hers as they moved in time with the music. She laid her head against his chest. You know this doesn't feel real, right? He dipped his head and whispered, Then let's make it real one moment at a time. Around them, the world blurred, the guests, the light, the music. None of it mattered. Just the way his thumb traced slow circles against her back. Just the way his breathing slowed when he held her. Later that night, after the last toast had been made and the guests sent home in sleek black cars, they stood together in the old library of the estate, the same one where she'd once seen the ring for the first time. Now she stood barefoot, hair loose, her dress draped over a nearby chair. He poured them each a glass of wine and handed her one. To everything that brought us here, he said. She raised her glass. Even the broken heel? Especially the broken heel. They drank, then sat together on the couch, legs tangled. Are you scared? He asked softly. She thought about it. Not about the wedding, or the move, or the job offer, but about what it meant to be seen this clearly, this completely. To be loved not for fitting in, but for standing out. No, she said finally. I'm not scared. I'm ready. He exhaled, and it was the most peaceful sound she'd ever heard. They stayed like that for hours, talking about nothing and everything. About the countries they wanted to visit. The kind of house they'd build one day. Whether they'd have a dog or two. Whether she'd write a novel. Whether he'd finally take a vacation without checking his email. When the fire burned low, he pulled her close again. Sleep, he said. I've got you. And she did. Months passed. Jessa took the job. She kept her name on the bylines, even as her wedding ring glittered under the office lights. She wrote stories that made people stop and think. She never let the world forget the people who were overlooked because she knew what it meant to be one of them. Trenton balanced things differently now. He rearranged meetings. Took weekends off. Sometimes he'd appear in her office doorway with coffee and a sandwich just to make sure she'd eaten. They built a home outside the city not far from the old estate. It had wide windows and tall bookshelves and a garden where she planted the same flowers that had bloomed during their rooftop night together. They fought sometimes. About laundry. About late nights. About little things like who left the kitchen light on. But they never walked away angry. They always came back. One evening, Jessa sat on the back porch, a blanket over her lap and a notebook open beside her. The wind carried the scent of rosemary and earth. Trenton joined her, a mug of tea in hand. I was thinking, he said, we should take a trip, somewhere quiet. No phones. Just you and me. She looked up. Where? He shrugged. Does it matter? She smiled. Not really. He sat beside her, their shoulders touching. I didn't know life could feel like this, she said. I did, he replied. I just didn't know it would be with you. And when the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in burnt orange and lavender, they sat together in silence, wrapped in everything they'd built: love, trust, laughter, and the knowledge that they'd found each other, not by accident, but by the miracle of timing and a single broken heel.